Welcome everybody to this panel on the 2020 elections. We're so glad you could join us tonight. I'm Susan McIntosh, the Interim Dean of Social Sciences, and I want to acknowledge the efforts of the Department of Political Science in organizing this election event featuring 3 social sciences alumni with deep connections to and knowledge of local and Texas state politics. It's my privilege to introduce our 3 distinguished panelists. Ed Emmett, class of 1971, was Harris County Judge for 12 years until 2019. He was a member of the Texas State Legislature from 1979 to 1987, and he served on the Interstate Commerce Commission for 3 years in the George H.W. Bush administration. Judge Emmett is currently a professor of the practice here at Rice, and also a fellow at Rice's Kinder Institute for Urban Research and the Baker Institute for Public Policy. Annise Parker, class of 1978, served as 61st mayor of Houston from 2010 until 2016. She also served as an at-large member of the Houston City Council from 1998 to 2003 and city comptroller from 2004 to 2010. Mayor Parker has been a fellow at the Doerr Institute for New Leaders and professor in the practice here at Rice. She's currently president and CEO of the Victory Fund and Victory Institute. Lisa Gray, class of 1988, is a senior writer on the features desk of the Houston Chronicle. She's held many of the Chronicle's most interesting jobs, including member of the editorial board, acting op-ed editor, columnist, and, most fun of all, founding editor of Gray Matters, the Chronicle site named Best Blog in Texas 3 years in a row. Ms. Gray's current writing has focused on COVID-19 pandemic and election administration during the upcoming election. Our moderator tonight is Mark Jones, fellow of the Baker Institute for Public Policy and professor in political science, where he holds the Joseph D. Jamail Chair in Latin American Studies. His research focuses on the effect of electoral laws and other political institutions on governance, representation, and voting. Professor Jones is a popular and frequent commentator in local, state, national, and international media on issues of government, politics, and public policy. We'll move now to a moderated discussion by the panelists for 30 to 40 minutes, and then panelists will engage your questions. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We have 3 faculty working behind the scenes to read and consolidate your questions so that we can get as many as possible to the panelists. You'll hear Political Science Department Chair Ashley Leeds reading the questions. I want to extend many thanks to our panelists and to everyone who worked to make this event possible. Our moderator will now open the discussion.
Thank you, Dean McIntosh, and thank you everyone for attending tonight, especially our 3 esteemed panelists, Judge Emmett, Mayor Parker, and Ms. Gray. I'm going to start off with a set of questions for all of you. First one, going first to Mayor Parker, then Judge Emmett, and then Ms. Gray, and we'll mix it up a little bit as we move along. So the first question relates to a change in our ballot here in Texas. That is, we joined the 43 other states in the country that no longer use straight ticket voting. So that voting option, which has been the voting option in Texas in all living memory for all Texans, where that allowed you to go on the ballot, check one party, and then vote, by doing so, vote for all the candidates in the party, that's gone. So this will be the first election where we don't have the straight ticket option. And the question is, what impact do you think not having the straight ticket option will have on the 2020 elections? Mayor Parker?
Well, it clearly was intended to depress Democrats going to the bottom of the ballot. And I'm a little concerned that that actually may be the case. I will say that I've always believed that judges should not be on a straight ticket poll. I've had a public position on that for a very long time. However, every election cycle see a lot of folks, particularly in the presidential year, who go in and vote in the presidential race, and if they don't have a straight ticket poll, they'll walk right back out again. and the drop off on races can be extreme. And the farther you are down on the ballot, the more impact there is from that. And the belief by the Texas legislature was that it would be a greater benefit to Republicans to do away with the straight ticket poll. And I have to concur.
Hey, thank you. As someone who actually has a lot of experience with the straight ticket ballot, Judge Emmett.
Yeah, that's one reason I'm sitting here tonight, and never mind, I won't go into that. I tend to tear up if I talk about it too much. Actually, some of us have been in favor of doing away with straight ticket for a long, long time, going all the way back to the 1970s. The fact that only 6 other states have straight ticket show that it's really not a partisan thing. I understand why people want to keep it if they've had it, but it really makes no sense at all. I do agree with Annise that the idea of electing all the judges, and that's the problem in an urban area. We had the longest ballot in 2018. We had the longest ballot in American history. So nobody was going to spend the time to go all the way down that ballot and vote all the way to the bottom. As long as we have the judges, that's always going to be an issue. But I think fairness, you ask what's the impact going to be? I don't think anybody knows for sure. But I do think the Democrats' ground game is better organized to get people to do that than the Republican ground game in Harris County anyway. But it remains to be seen.
Great. Thank you, Judge Emmett. Ms. Gray?
I'm worried about stupid voting. I know that Democrats are worried about people not voting in races where they don't know anything, but I am more worried that people are going to just pick a name that they like. And we've had stupid voting before. Even with straight ticket voting, we would have candidates who should not have held office who simply got it because people liked their names. It's not a good trend. It's not a good look. I also think we need to get rid of some of the other seats that are on the ballot because most Texans don't know who or what they're voting for. They think the main job of the Texas Railroad Commission is to deal with railroads, not oil and gas. You know, as a rule of thumb, if you don't know what it is, we probably shouldn't have it on a ballot.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question, all three of you. Now we're going to go to the second question, and that gets to a reality that we're seeing here in 2020. Just 4 years ago in 2016, if you went to the national prognosticators and asked them what election is moving, what elections are close in the Houston area, they would have said none, because none of our 10 elections were competitive in the Houston area. This time around in 2020, 4 of them are. That'd be Congressional District 2, where Congressman Dan Crenshaw is facing a challenge from Sima Javarian. Congressional District 10, where Congressman Michael McCall is receiving a challenge from Mike Siegel. Congressional District 22, which is an open seat where Republican Troy Nails is being challenged by Sheree Kulkarni. It's a Republican-held seat. Pete Olson's retiring. And then on the other side, Lizzie Fletcher in Congressional District 7, who unseated John Culberson back in 2018. She's being challenged by Wesley Hunt, the Republican. So going to Ms. Gray, why do you think this is the case? Why do we have these competitive races in 2020 when we didn't have any competitive races back in 2016?
The demographics have changed radically. I think that's the biggest thing, and it's going to be spreading over Texas. Also, as that's happening, Democrats are bringing up better candidates. I used to be on the editorial board, and there were years when, you know, you would see seats not being challenged in the general election or with a very weak candidate. And now it's looking a lot more possible.
Thank you, Mayor Parker.
Yeah, I just concur with Lisa. This is a matter of they gerrymandered these districts to hell and back, and the demographics have caught up with it, which is actually part of the reason there's so much enthusiasm on the part of Democrats to flip the seats. It's not just the candidates, it's everybody who's looking at redistricting. And I will just say, it is possible to do sane redistricting with logical boundaries and buy-in. We did it in the city of Houston, and it is absolutely possible to do it. But in my view, the only way to do it is to have an independent redistricting body, not leave it to the state legislature.
Thank you. Judge Emmett?
No, I actually agree with that last statement. But until the courts uphold compact and contiguous districts, we're going to continue to see districts like the one that runs from Austin to Northwest Harris County. Okay, I'm going to raise the elephant in the room. It's not just demographics, it's Donald Trump. I mean, there's no way around that. And I have to think back, and you heard the years we all graduated. I was prior to all the other panelists. I remember going to talk to Bill Archer, Congressman Bill Archer, who was in a totally safe district, the one that Congresswoman Fletcher is now in. But it was 65, 70% Republican. And I was doing redistricting in 1981. And I went to see him about moving his district into downtown. So the business interests were interested in doing that. He pitched a fit. He said, "Oh, no, you cannot do that. That gives me more voters in the 4th Ward." And I said, "Well, but your district's 65%. He wagged his finger at me and said, "You don't remember Watergate in 1974 and Richard Nixon." And he was right. I hadn't run then. What we're seeing now, what we saw in 2018, 2016 to a little bit, but certainly in 2018, and I think we're going to see it again in 2020, is a lot of people who are just turned off by what's going on at the top of the ticket. And that's made some of these races competitive. The other thing I will say, when I got into elective office back in the late 70s, I was a Republican. There weren't any. When I was elected, there were 24 Republicans and 126 Democrats in the Texas House. So it was more the ins versus the outs. And you're seeing that now. Young people who want to get into politics look at all these Republican office holders that have been there forever, and they're going, "Well, I can't break into that. I'm going to be a Democrat." And yeah, there is some philosophy behind it, but by and large, the next generation coming up is going to run as Democrats, and there's just no way around it. You don't see many bright young Republicans coming up. The one exception would be Dan Crenshaw, who's kind of created his own rock star image.
Well, thank you, Judge Emmett. So actually, Mayor Parker brought us with a nice segue into our next top question, which relates to redistricting. So in 2018, Democrats had a net gain in the Texas House. So now Democrats hold 67 seats, Republicans hold 83 seats. There are 150 overall. You need 76 to have a majority, 75 to tie, which means for Democrats to take control of the Texas House, they need a net gain of 9 seats. That's important because that will especially determine congressional redistricting in the 2021 legislative session, because if Republicans don't control the House, then the ability to engage in a gerrymander is going to be at least modestly affected. Probably will end up with the courts. So focusing on the Texas House, what do you think the prospects are for Democrats to flip the House, or conversely for Republicans to retain control of the House? And we'll start with Judge Emmett.
Well, I think they're at least 50-50 that the Democrats could take control of the House, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot. As we saw with the election of Joe Strauss as Speaker, once the Democrats get to a certain level, they may not have the Speaker as a Democrat, but they do have an ability to function. But as for redistricting, it's really not going to matter. Certainly the legislative districts, and I have enjoyed talking to people who say, boy, if the Democrats can take the House, they can weigh in on legislative redistricting. No, they can't, because the way legislative redistricting works, typically the House would draw the House districts and the Senate would rubber stamp it, and Senate would draw theirs and the House would rubber stamp it. But if the House is Democrat, then the Senate's not going to rubber stamp it. And likewise, the House won't rubber stamp the Senate. But where does it go? It doesn't go back to the legislature. It goes to the Legislative Redistricting Board. which is made up of four statewide officials and the Speaker of the House. And four of those at least are going to be Republicans, including Dan Patrick and George P. Bush, and I forget who else is on it. So legislative redistricting won't be affected. I do think the congressional districts are going to go to the courts anyway. This will just be a faster path to the courts than they've gotten there in the past.
Okay, thank you. It would be Ken Paxton and Glenn Hager, I think, are the other two on the legislative redistricting board. So Ms. Gray?
I think it's possible, which that the House could go Democratic. I've been watching a lot of the races, especially in sort of suburban areas like Sugar Land, where the demographics are sort of up in the air. Sugar Land has a lot of Asian voters, and we haven't really seen whether they will be voting in a block or whether they'll go Democratic or Republican. And so that's one that I think may flip this election, but I don't know. And I think there's similar dynamics in others.
Thanks. Mayor Parker?
I think the Democrats take the House. I concur with Ed that it doesn't gain much in the long term in terms of redistricting, but that is a big focus. It's one of the reasons that there's sort of hand-to-hand combat going on in Sarah Davis's district here in Houston as one of the 9 seats to flip. It is a Democratic district, and Sarah has held it against the tide, and she's had pretty stiff opposition every time she's run. This time, Ann Johnson's making the second run at it, but there's a lot of momentum on Ann's side, and Ed and I laugh about this a lot. We're both pretty centrist. Nobody likes people in the middle. So.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the case. Okay, so now sort of going a little broader away from Texas politics and thinking both about Texas politics, but also national politics. And one of the reasons why we're doing this Zoom call as opposed to being over in Kraft Hall is COVID-19. And so the question would be, so what effects do you think COVID-19 has had on the 2020 election process? Say the 2 or 3 most important. And we'll start with Mayor Parker on this.
So I run the
LGBT at this point, because I hadn't gotten to go first yet, have I? Did I just go first? No,
You just went first.
I just wanted to do that just to.
He was threatening to talk over me and interrupt me. I don't know where he got that idea. It must be a Republican thing.
I have a mute button though. Unlike Wallace.
I run a Washington-based political organization, the LGBT Victory Fund. We only work with LGBTQ candidates, but we're every state, every level. So I am actually dealing with candidates across the country. We have more than 300 that we've endorsed. And we're an organization that preaches field. A lot of these are smaller down ballot races, and you can walk your district 4 times and it makes a difference. It's been really difficult for candidates to pivot away from that and try to find other ways to connect to voters. I mean, there's some fun and interesting things, and I'll just say one of the most innovative was that there's one candidate who sends out kids with sidewalk chalk in his neighborhood, and they put messages on all the corners where people are out walking in the evenings, like in the early days of COVID when we were all out in the evenings because we were stuck at home and walking around. That personal touch is important, and I don't know of a campaign that is as aggressively physically going door to door as we would have in a normal circumstance. So that shifts all the campaigns to some kind of electronic communication, phones, texts. I don't know that anybody knows exactly how that will shape connection to voters. I personally believe that people are paying attention in a different way. You know, I used to make phone calls to donors and to voters, and you know, no one would return my calls, no one would pick up. There are actually a lot of people at home and bored who will answer the phone and talk to you, but whether that is the same, you know, personal touch as you would get from a regular field campaign, I don't know. And of course, in this election, it probably doesn't matter what anybody does. It's the top of the ticket. It's, you know, it's the elephants clashing, and you know, the grass is going to get trampled. I think it's another change election, just like 2018 is, and I think this is the big mo is on the Democratic side, all across the country.
Thank you, Judge Emmett.
Well, there's one impact, and that one impact overrides everything else. That one impact is it changed the topic from the economy, which was booming, to COVID and everything else. I mean, it took away the one thing that the president absolutely had in a lot of those Rust Belt states. Everybody was, they may not have liked him. They may have thought he was boorish and all that. But as long as the economy was don't I remember somebody saying it's the economy, stupid, once upon a time? That was the issue. And the Democrats were going to be hard pressed because they could talk about his personality, but everybody knows that. And most people don't like it. I don't think. Some might. But once COVID came, then the joblessness went through the roof, and everybody, you know, we were losing jobs. The economy suddenly went sour. So it took away that one major issue. And so now everything's focused on sort of more minor issues. I hate to say COVID's a minor issue, but it's how do you respond in February versus August and this, that, and the other. And there's no longer this discussion about the economy.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
One thing it's done is it's taken a lot of the air out of the room. We don't have enough time and brain space to talk about other issues or to look at candidates who are not dealing directly with COVID, you know, and jobs that don't have to do with it. Another thing is we are really looking at the mechanics of voting. I can't remember another election where we were worried about ballots being stolen to as great a degree as we are now. And thinking about things like voting by mail, which, you know, if you're going to have a ballot as long as Texas, I'd like to, you know, have it as a take-home test. Give me a few days to work on it. So will that change how we vote permanently? I don't know. But it's at least on the table. We're thinking about that.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to move to a question that's a little different than what we've previously been talking about. And this is sort of a hypothetical situation because it's probably not going to occur in reality. But imagine a scenario where you could ask the Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick one question, where he would be required to give you a truthful answer. It could be a truth serum, whatever the case. But if you could ask Dan Patrick one question and get it where he would be required to give you a truthful answer, what would that question be, Ms. Gray?
Have you no shame?
Okay, so that's the Dan Patrick. What about you, Mayor Parker?
Well, I don't think I can top that one. I might say, why do you hate cities?
Okay, Judge Emmett?
He quit talking to me a long time ago, so it wouldn't do me any good to ask a question.
Okay, well I want to move on to one final question, and this was brought up by, I think it was brought up, several people talked about how at least in Harris County, Democrats have a better ground game than Republicans these days, better grassroots. One of the reasons for that is an organization called the Texas Organizing Project. What can you tell us about the Texas Organizing Project and its impact and role in Harris County politics or Texas politics, both in terms of its participation in the Democratic primary as well as in general elections? And the first question I'd go to Judge Emmett.
The Texas Organizing Project.
You asked for that one, Ed. I'm just saying.
Okay. Well, they're very good at what they do. they have a large group of, I don't think they're volunteers. I think they're paid block workers. There is a theory on the Republican side that I don't know if it's true or not, that Texas Organizing Project is just Acorn reincarnated. That it's when Acorn went out of business because they got in trouble, they just rebranded themselves as Texas Organizing Project. And there probably is a lot of that, but whether it's an exact fit, I don't know. How are they funded? Now, that is a question that a lot of us wanted to know. And if you look, and I'm trying to stay out of my race and my successor, but Judge Hidalgo, largest contribution was a $400,000 in-kind contribution from the Texas Organizing Project in 2018. And then right after after she took office, she talked Houston Endowment into giving $400,000 for a Houston community survey. And I think, Mark, you actually had something to say about whether or not that was a legitimate survey. But guess who was given that money to do the block door-to-door survey? Texas Organizing Project. So now they've kind of legitimized themselves as survey takers. They're probably involved in the census, if I had to guess. They've probably been involved in getting paid for contact tracing. And there's nothing inherently wrong about that, but I think they are a force and they're going to be here for a long time, and I think they're smart enough to have seen what Acorn did to get in trouble, that they won't do those things. So yeah, I think they are the dominant force when it comes to ground game politics, certainly in Harris County.
Thank you, Judge Emmett. Yeah, that was just as the judge mentioned. I think my comment or quote in the Chronicle about that was the survey from an academic perspective was worthless because of the methodology or lack thereof. And yeah, definitely seemed to be more designed to funnel money to an organization than to actually do sound public policy. Ms. Gray?
I was interested recently to read that they got a chunk of one of those big grants to sort of promote racial justice. It was a big national grant from Susan Sandler, who's done a lot of supporting the same sorts of things that George Soros does. So they do seem to be pulling in national money. There's a lot of interest in, turning Texas blue, and obviously organizing Black and brown communities will help do that. So.
Okay, well, thanks. And Mayor Parker, same question to you, but with a slight twist on, let's forget about the general election, Democrats versus Republicans. What's their role within the Democratic primary? For instance, recently related to District Attorney Kim Ogg.
Well, it wasn't just District Attorney Kim Ogg. They had an impact up and down the ballot in the Democratic primary. And, I have worked with Texas Organizing Project as mayor, have interacted with them in party politics. They are absolutely the sort of the ground troops for going door to door, for canvassing, turning out voters. They are largely people of color representing low-income communities. And this is absolutely a way to have impact on politics without having a big personal bank account. And they take it very seriously. And many of them are folks of great integrity and great passion for what happens in their neighborhood. Now, I'm going to go back to what Lisa said earlier about sort of stupid voting too, though, and that they came at a lot of Democratic candidates from the left, reflecting their politics. But many of us were horrified to see that every white male Democratic incumbent judge on the ballot had a woman opponent, and every one of those women won, including knocking out several of the highest rated judges in Harris County. That is masterful organizing. It's also stupid voting. They also came after Kim Ogg. She had 2 opponents running at her from the left, and Top was with her. Or a lot of the folks, the Soros money was with Kim Ogg 4 years ago. A lot of folks had great promise, or felt she had great promise to be one of the more progressive district attorneys. I have to say, I think Kim Ogg is the most progressive district attorney we've ever had. That is a very low bar. However, she has done some really progressive things and moved us in the right direction. She trounced her opponents in the Democratic primary, but they did their best to take her out. And she didn't pivot to the left, so she is well positioned to be returned to office this November.
Okay, thank you. So for our final set of questions, these are individual questions, one for each of you that's a little distinct. The first one's for you, Judge Emmett. What was the most difficult challenge you faced as county judge during your 12-year tenure?
Leaving aside natural disasters and things, just looking at the functions of the job. To me, the hardest thing was dealing with issues where the public thought they knew what was going on, but they really didn't, and trying to explain it to them. I'll give you the simple one, and then I'll give you the one that was the most painful experience I had. The simple one was we had people keep showing up demanding that we not build Dynamo Stadium, just furious about Dynamo Stadium. And every time I'd tell them, well, we're not building it, the team owner's building it. And yet they'd come back week after week after week. We never could. To this day, I still have a few people who are mad because the county built Dynamo Stadium. We didn't. Mayor Parker was there, and the team paid for it. All we did. So that one. But the one that hurt me the most, just personally, there was a petition drive to force me as county judge to put a new tax on the ballot for the Harris County Department of Education for pre-K funding. And I'm a huge supporter of pre-K funding, but the way it was structured wasn't legal. It was based on a law back in the 1930s that had already been repealed. And trying to explain that to people and getting beat up for being against pre-K, that was really the hardest thing I had to deal with, because you're on the side of the 100,000 people that signed the petition, but they all think you're denying them because you don't like what they want. And most people might not even remember that issue, but that was my hardest issue.
Okay. Thank you, Judge Emmett. Mayor Parker, very similar question. What was the most difficult challenge you faced as mayor?
So I'm gonna follow Ed and say that the one that I still scratch my head. I didn't have a hurricane in my time as mayor. I had one major flooding event, but I had the worst drought in recorded Houston history in 2011. And you know that Houston doesn't have any water trucks because we get rain. We don't have to water. And I can't tell you how many town halls and civic associations I went to, and people jumped me about the fact that I was letting everything die because we weren't watering enough, and that I'm still running into people who blame me for the fact that Memorial Park was devastated. Well, you could have just turned Buffalo Bayou, dumped all the water from Buffalo Bayou onto the park and saved the trees. No, it actually doesn't work that way. That was the frustrating one. They had I love the one who put out a call for people, the joggers, to take extra bottles of water and pour them on the trees as they were jogging through the jogging track. It wasn't enough. No, the most painful and difficult was actually red light cameras. And I'll tell you why. The red light cameras were instituted under my predecessor, Bill White. And I believe in red light cameras. I think they work. You can game them. And we could spend 20 minutes talking about how you game them and how they could go wrong. But I believe they save lives. And he let the contract, red light cameras were around the city. In his last couple of weeks in office, he went to the council, and every contract the city, I'm assuming the county does too, has an out clause. Well, he went to council and he took the out clause out of it. So we usually have a cancellation for convenience clause in everything we do. And we did not have that cancellation for convenience clause when I came into office. There was a petition to remove red light cameras. And this was my, my first year in office. I was probably a little cocky about this, or maybe naive. And I surely people won't believe all the lies about red light cameras. There was actually there was a legal issue involved as to whether it needed to go on the ballot or not. There were sufficient signatures, but you cannot undo a contract with a referendum, a legally binding contract. We went back and forth, and I made the wrong call. I said, I'm not going to be the mayor that denies access to the ballot on an important issue. I should have fought it, and I fought everyone that came after that was questionable, but I didn't on that one. It went to the ballot, and I found myself out at candidate forums around the city, and I would say, everybody in here you have a driver's license? Yeah. You understand you can't run red lights? Raise your hand. Yeah. Side impact collisions at red lights or some of the most dangerous? Absolutely. So do you support red light cameras? No. And I saw it over and over and over again, and it made me nuts. We lost at the ballot. Red light cameras, the petition required us to take them down, and because I had allowed it in, I then could not go back and say, hey, well, it was an illegal petition. But and because we didn't have an out clause, it cost the city $10 million to buy our way out of that contract. So it was a financial hit. It was a hit to public safety. And it was a hit to my belief in rational voters.
Thanks. Sounds like American Traffic Solutions had a good lobbyist. So the final question is a little distinct.
Yeah, someone affiliated with Rice apparently was also involved in that. Whoa.
Oh, she's mad.
Yeah. So I'll go one final question for Ms. Gray, and that would be related to something we're seeing. We're in a very polarized era where people are searching for information, often they gain misleading information or biased information, often from Facebook, Twitter, other forms of social media, cable networks that essentially for ratings play to their base. One of the last remaining bastions we have of sort of straight up information are newspapers. But at the same time, across the country, as the Poynter Institute and others have shown, the newspaper industry is in crisis. So what do you think the most difficult challenges facing the newspaper industry, and how does it resolve this in order that we don't see more papers either disappear or, like, say, some papers in Texas, I wouldn't say any of the Hearst publications who actually have done a good job maintaining staff, but some of your fellow publications in the Lone Star State have been pretty much gutted, especially those owned by hedge funds.
Obviously, the question is, how do we make money? The newspaper industry traditionally relies on print advertising, even though people have always paid for subscriptions to get the daily newspaper thrown in their yard. It's those print ads that make the money. And the internet has eaten that business. It's gone. Classified advertising, that hasn't been real for 20 years. We used to sell ads for things like movie times, and that's never going to come back. So how do you make money now? It has to be entirely on the subscriber, which has some interesting implications for democracy. Or maybe we're going to make money by getting nonprofit grants, which has its own ethical stickiness. Maybe we become nonprofit owned. I'm not sure where that's going. I'm very interested in it. I'm interested in hearing new models and new ways to support journalism. But we're in a really hard time now, and regional newspapers like the Chronicle can draw from a smaller base of subscribers than a national publication. So we're especially in danger on the front lines. I'm relieved that Hearst owns us. We haven't been, bought by a vulture capital fund that strips the bones dry, but you know, it's a precarious time for everybody.
Okay, thank you. So I have one final set of questions for everyone, and then I'll hand it over to Ashley. And this relates just a short sort of crystal ball question. We're a little more than a month away from November 3rd. We may not know the results of some elections till November 4th or beyond. I think in Texas, we'll probably know sooner than other states. What's your projection for the statewide races? If we think in terms of Democrats haven't won a statewide race since 1994. Will this be the year that Democrats break the streak? And if so, will it be at the presidential level, the Senate level, the railroad commissioner level, or one of the judicial races? So what are your estimates for those races? We'll start with Judge Emmett.
I was afraid you were going to start with me again. Didn't you just start with me last time?
I have an odd number, so I had to start with someone.
I think, no, I don't think this is the year. Although it's not out of the realm of reason that Vice President Biden wins Texas, but I don't see the Railroad Commission is one of those that's down ballot. But frankly, the Republican running is named Jim Wright. Back to the
Stupid voting. Yeah.
That's going to be a problem to defeat Jim Wright in the state of Texas. I think John Cornyn has run a good, positive, above board campaign, and I don't see him in trouble. The judgeships, no, those are going to all go one way or the other. I think it's going to be close, but I don't think this is the year. However, I don't know who's on this show, and I know this will get me in trouble. Remember, I started by saying I was in the legislature when there were 24 Republicans and 126 Democrats. So I saw the generational change, and I can now see the generational change coming and going the other way for a little while. I think anybody who denies that is just kidding themselves. So it is going to happen, but I do think doing away with straight ticket is going to benefit everybody, because it is going to allow back, I hate to take this long with the answer, but there counties in Texas used to vote 70 and 80% for the Republican for president, and all the county officials were Democrat. And people went, how'd that happen? Well, because they were local. They knew the candidates personally. That's hard to do in Harris County, but I think around the state, you're going to see more and more of that, where people, matter of fact, a Rice graduate, I think he was my year, named Bob Parks, was the district judge in Monahans, Texas, very Republican area, and he was a Democrat. And he was district judge until he retired, because in a place like Monahans, people knew him. So I do think the state's going to trend Democrat, but I think the absence of straight ticket is going to allow for popular Republicans to remain in office.
Okay. Merrick Parker, do you think this is the year or not?
I think Cornyn comes back. Cornyn's about exciting as watching wallpaper. Unlike Ted Cruz, who everybody, even from both sides, loves to hate. MJ has galvanized some Democrats. I just don't see it. I think Biden may actually take the state, but I think Cornyn comes back. Probably the Railroad Commission, even though the Democrat is actually much more qualified than Mr. Wright, I think those Republicans stay. So maybe we turn purple. We're definitely not turning blue, but Harris County, it's going to be a Democratic sweep up and down.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
I don't know about the very top of the ticket. I agree with Mayor Parker that Harris County is very likely to be a straight sweep. And I'm sort of curious about what happens in all those other in-between places. Those other suburban districts across the state, I think, are incredibly interesting. And I don't know which way they're going. There's so many variables this year with straight ticket going away, with the crazy race we're having with COVID, that we could have some really wild swings.
Yeah.
As a journalist, I'm just sort of waiting for that. I don't know. I don't know exactly what we're going to be doing yet. That's why we have to wait.
Well, thank y'all.
Mark, I want to step in and say one more thing, because the real interesting thing is if President Trump loses nationally and he's no longer there, then the question is, what does the Republican Party after Trump look like? I had this conversation with one of my colleagues on campus, and he made the statement about what's the Republican Party going to do to move back to the center? And I said, well, what's the Democratic Party going to do to move back to the center? And so 2 years from now, if Trump is no longer around, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how both parties redefine themselves in the state of Texas.
And I think the center's moved, most definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, thank y'all. I want to hand it over to Ashley now, who has some questions from our audience.
We have quite a few questions from the audience. Thanks to all the panelists so far. And feel free, audience members, to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll handle as many of them as we can. So the first question has to do with the possibility of mail-assisted voting fraud. The president has suggested that all mail-assisted voting is rife with fraud. Do you think that's true? And could this be used successfully for the Texas Attorney General to intervene and disqualify some mail ballots?
It is not true. Period. End of sentence.
Will some ballots be disqualified? Yes. How many? I
Thanks.
think we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah, the President Trump's ability to explain himself never ceases to amaze me. You know, what he said last night between the yelling at the debate was, if you solicit a ballot and you fill it out and send it back in, then that's okay. I think everybody agrees. There's no problem with that. I think what is a little worrisome is just a blanket mail out of ballots unsolicited. And we actually saw it in the Democratic primary in Harris County. There were a couple of women who, Annise, have they been indicted or were they just exposed? They were going into nursing homes for a particular candidate or two and saying, just fill out the ballot, just vote for this guy and this one, and then sign it. And that was hurting all the down ballot Democrats in the primary. So you're always going to have a little bit of that, but as long as that's under control and you don't have ballot harvesting, I think mail ballots are fine. But the other problem with just mailing them out carte blanche, people move a lot, and the voter roll is always overstated. When I was in the legislature, I would meet people who were on the voter roll 3 times because they had moved that often during just a 2-year period. And so that's what makes it worrisome. It's just the blanket mail out of ballots to everybody who's on the voter roll.
There are plenty of mechanisms in place to prevent duplicate voting. The danger is I don't think it is a realistic problem, but the danger is that the unsolicited mail ballots get picked up by somebody else, filled out and sent in.
I will say there's been one humorous thing. I hate to use the term, but a right-wing group was very upset because they actually had an example where a couple, one of them voted in the Democratic primary, one of them in the Republican primary, and they got their ballots and they sent them back in, and they were horrified because it had numbers followed by the letters R and D, and they said, so see, this shows that they know who's voting how. Well, you were voting in a primary, so they had to know whether you were voting in a Democratic or Republican primary. So apocryphal stories like that are really sort of fueling some of this.
I should say too, I've talked a lot with Dan Wallace before in the Rice Computer Science Department. He is so much more worried, and I think rightfully so, about the security of voting machines.
Yeah, me too.
If you want to steal an election, the way to do it is to hack.
Yes.
It's not to like mess around with little old paper ballots, which are a pain in the neck and which leave a paper trail.
Right.
And so I think that the whole discussion is off base.
So our next question, we have actually a set of questions that came in about this topic, which I think I can sum up quickly with, is it time to get rid of the Electoral College?
Not right now. The world is a mess, although it's tempting. Maybe
No.
in 6 months.
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
Because I don't think the way it was set up originally, and of course a lot has changed because people forget that originally the president and vice president didn't run as a ticket, and that created a mess. And was it John Quincy Adams that the House ended up deciding the election, and they gave it to him over Jackson? So I mean, yeah, there are lots of things can change, but I think the idea that, you know, 2 states could possibly determine the entire presidential election, that's troublesome to the country as a whole. Something about the greater good.
So why can't we change it?
Oh, you can. I just don't think we should.
Why not?
I just told you.
Because 2 states can change it is troublesome. That seems like we should change it, Ed.
No, I don't think the fact that you have a lot of people that have a special interest, and you know, that in 2 major urban states, they may have an interest and therefore they can dictate what happens to the whole nation. No, I think that's why it was set up the way it was.
I don't think Texas and California will ever vote in the same direction.
Well, but we are the United States of America, not the United State of America.
Can we be the United People? Can I have the same like power in my vote as somebody in Michigan or Connecticut?
Well, you actually do. Things change. I mean, look, I have to remind my students all the time. 1972, who was the Democratic nominee? George McGovern. Who won a lot of primaries that year, even in the North? George Wallace. You had McGovern and Wallace in the same Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party got destroyed in 72. But 2 years later, it was a Democrat sweep. So I mean, these things come and go. But I think the Electoral College has served well.
I think the Electoral College is an artifact. We no longer we may live in a world where votes can be stolen and hacked, but we also live in a world where people have access to information and mobility, and I think we need to go to a system where it's the popular vote that decides, and that's the end of it.
Would you change the Senate?
No, I wouldn't change the Senate.
Why not?
Because if this is an experiment in democracy where we have 50 smaller experiments in democracy, and we actually believe in federalism and states' rights, you have to be able to put the states on an equal footing. However, I think we are losing some of that ability for states to make their own independent decisions. You know, one of the things, the changes in marijuana laws are a great example where state after state moved to decriminalize marijuana, and then you see the federal government bigfooting in. I mean, I do believe that having representation in the Senate that allows smaller states to have a say in the direction of the country alongside Texas or California or New York State is important. I just think the Electoral College is a completely different animal, and it's time for it to go extinct.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, if you've ever tried to explain the Electoral College to someone not from the United States, you very quickly realize how strange it is. It just seems it should be easier. Okay.
Have you ever tried to explain the parliamentary system to somebody here?
So the next question is perhaps a challenging one. What suggestions do you have for the debate commission to make the next debates more educational and informative?
trap doors, election ejector seats, microphones that you can cut off. No, I don't have any real suggestions. I don't think Trump is going to change.
Any other ideas?
The rules have already been set, so we can't, have a hard turn the mic off at 2 minutes rule, right?
Well, I don't know why not. I mean, the rules have been set. It's just that one of them didn't follow them from the beginning, and then neither one of them followed them after that. So how do you insist that somebody follows the rules that their team agreed to?
You turn the microphone off.
I know
We
that's
need switches, or just unplug it.
that may be the only thing to do, but
Yeah,
So
civility.
the next question has to do with election night. Are you concerned that we won't know the outcome of the presidential election on election night, and why?
We probably won't. Am I concerned? I'm less concerned about that than about, possible peaceful transition were Biden to win. I mean, I think almost everyone says it may be a week before we know that mail-in count.
I'm not concerned about either of those things.
Why not?
Well, number one, election nights tend to get long anyway. I mean, they could get long. So if we don't know that night, that's not a big deal. And frankly, I'm not concerned about the peaceful transition. It's going to occur. I mean, that's bluster.
I wish I had Ed's faith. I don't think we're going to know on election night, and this is not just about the presidential race. These are races all over the country, at the local level too. The problem is Trump has been steadily increasing the drumbeat on attacks on our democracy, attacks on our electoral system, attacks on the institutions on which people are going to depend in this election cycle. And it's not just the problem of people not accepting the results. It's the problem that folks, this continued tearing down of the pillars of our democracy has effects that will be long lasting. So do I think he will ultimately leave? If he loses, he will be forced to.
Yeah.
But could he make it extremely painful before he does? Yes.
So the next question.
Let me take a little bit different tact. And I think there would be a lot of people who might be voting for Donald Trump, who, if he lost, would be relieved. And I don't think you would see any sort of a groundswell to keep him in office.
That moment last night when he was asked to denounce the Proud Boys didn't unsettle you? I'm not worried about voters in general. I'm worried about very specific armed groups.
Well, but they won't be able to keep him in office. I mean,
Right.
the Justice Department, the military, I mean, the FBI, no, that doesn't work. That's why I say it doesn't worry me. Now, might there be some instances of violence and idiocy? Absolutely. But I'm not at all worried about him not leaving. I mean, that's just out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I agree with that. Of course, last night was like watching the personification of Trump's Twitter feed.
So I think maybe we have time for one more question. Mark, do you think?
Oh yeah, one quick question.
Okay. So this election has seen an unusually high number of prominent conservatives and groups like the Lincoln Project and Republicans Against Trump working together with Democrats to defeat President Trump. Do you think liberals will be more sympathetic to conservative ideas because they've been exposed to these prominent conservative voices and worked with them? and vice versa? Or do you think we'll immediately go back into two camps?
We will immediately, we're still in two camps. There's no going back to two camps. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, but only while the enemy's still out there.
I am really hoping civility comes back.
Yes, I hope so.
I don't think it necessarily is a guarantee, but I would love to hear candidates talk about ideas again.
No,
I miss that.
I think in large measure, civility will come back. Again, a lot of the extremists that you currently see in the Republican Party were in the Democratic Party when I started in politics. The people who, loosed the dogs and the water cannons on the civil rights marchers, those were all Democrats. And so things come and go. What I hope, and I'm talking to Mayor Parker now specifically, I hope interest groups like the one you represent start looking at individuals based on their own positions and don't become forever arms of one political party or the other. And that works both ways. I mean, there are some Republican groups, Republican leaning groups that just can't bring themselves to endorse a Democrat. And likewise, here locally, we had a group in 2018 that by all measures should have endorsed the Republican and then didn't endorse any Republican. So hopefully we'll get back to people saying, you know what, they're really good people in both parties.
Point taken, Ed, and the organization I lead, the LGBTQ Victory Fund and Victory Institute, we are nonpartisan. We endorse Republicans. They're few and far between. There's not very many gay Republicans out there, but when we can find them, we endorse them. And I'll also say to Lisa, there is civility in government. It tends to be at the local level. And, in town councils and county commissioners meetings all across the country, good, effective government happens every day, and it is focused on the mission and not on the partisanship. It is toxic at the federal level. It's often toxic at the state level, but at the local level, we get stuff done because we have to.
Thank you. Thank our panelists. We can hope then that national politics becomes more like local politics as we move forward. So I'd like to thank our three panelists, Judge Emmett, Mayor Parker, Ms. Gray, as well as our audience and everyone behind the scenes for supporting this. And we look forward to having you at future School of Social Sciences events. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Enjoy it.